Here we go. Part 2 of today's Local 6 Legal Line, visiting now with Joe Roark of the Bryan Law Center. And our questions turn to criminal defense. And we have someone who says, my son is 14, got caught shoplifting in Walmart. He was arrested, taken down, has never been in trouble before, but what do we need to do at this point? What do you do with a 14-year-old that's caught shoplifting?
Well, I mean, at this point, it's entirely possible this case will be resolved with what's called a court-designated worker or in some other informal manner. If it's his first shoplifting offense, there will not be any particularly serious consequences to it, but it's the sort of thing that begins to generate a record just on his juvenile record for now. He certainly probably will not be permitted to go back into the store where it happened, but the main thing you need to do is get somebody to read him the riot act and kind of scare him to death about the difficulty that this can cause for you on down the road. And there will be some consequences, but they won't be super bad. Just be with him, stay with him through the process, be an advocate, but understand that there needs to be a consequence when somebody breaks the law, even if they're 14 and never done anything before.
I have a question from Mindy, who says, I was a passenger in a car and we got pulled over for speeding. They decided to search the car. They found drugs in the trunk. We were both arrested, but the drugs were not mine. How do I fight this?
Okay. The defense in that case is probably going to be a question of whose vehicle was it. If you were a passenger in someone else's vehicle, I think the main thing you would argue is that I'm just a passenger. I didn't have access to the trunk. I didn't have access to this vehicle prior to being picked up. Assuming that's the case, that would seem to be the main defense. I mean, you're in a sticky situation where you have drugs in a vehicle that you're traveling in, but I think the best you can do is to say that I don't know how those got there. I just am signed up for a ride. But that would be the main line of argument. But otherwise, it's up to the Commonwealth to prove that those were your drugs, and they have to find some way to pin them specifically to you. And if they were in the trunk and you have access to the trunk, you couldn't really possess them in a meaningful sense anyway. So there's some stuff you can do about that case.
Have a little bit more than a minute left in this segment, and we have someone who says, my dad does not know how to read or write, and my mom has been depositing his paychecks into his bank for many, many years. Is this okay since she's doing it with his permission?
It is. Just permission is enough. If you really want to make sure it's extra safe, you can get a power of attorney for just general purposes or for that specific purpose. But if it's done with his authorization, you can sign checks on behalf of another person. I would not go hog wild with that or really take much liberty with it. But in this circumstance, if he's consenting and would confirm that, it's probably okay. But if you want to make sure it's okay, have somebody draft up a power of attorney that specifically authorizes your mom to do that, and you'd be covered for sure.
Got something in about the final 45 seconds, and someone says, I manage our company's Facebook account. It also happens to be the owner's personal Facebook account, and there are oftentimes some sleazy things on there that I really don't want to see. Isn't there some law against this?
No, there's not a law against having sleazy things on your Facebook account or otherwise having things that are distasteful posted there. I mean, I think rather than a legal response to that, I mean, I think either say, boss, I'm not doing this, or we need to set up an actual business Facebook account is probably the easiest way to get around that. But I mean, it's not contrary to law. It's not a violation of anything to have stuff that you find distasteful on somebody else's Facebook. Your options are to tell them you won't have that job anymore, or tell them to set up an actual business account. Is probably the easiest way to get around it. If you can find a way to gently move that through to your boss and just tell them it's bad for business. I mean, just have some sense about it, if nothing else. So that's what I'd tell you to do in that context. But you don't have to sit through being exposed to gross, nasty stuff. I mean, depending on what it is, as part of your job.
Never know what kind of questions you'll get on Legal Line. Our thanks to Joe Roark and previously Tara Swanson and Mark Bryant for their visits today. If you'd like to review either one of these segments, you can do so shortly. Look under the Legal Line icon online at WPSDlocal6.com.